All right. Everyone hear me? Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of Build. I'm guessing this is the crowd that didn't go to the party last night, since you're here nice and early. So appreciate you coming here for the fun. So this session is a panel discussion with the team that you see in front of you here that leads the web platform, so both websites and web apps. So in both of the keynotes, you saw how one of the big focuses going forward, actually in the past as well as going forward, is enabling cross-platform experiences. And we definitely believe that web technologies are central to that. So this is a great opportunity to ask your questions and get a little deeper on that. So the good news is that the format is super simple. This is hopefully the shortest slide deck you're going to see all week. We're just here to answer your questions. So there's 2 mics in the 2 aisles here. So we'll just start taking questions pretty soon here. If you have a question, just step up to the mic. So this is really your session. The only guidelines I'm going to throw out there is to try to ask questions that are of general interest to everyone. If you have a more specific question about a specific issue, you can come find us afterwards, or we'll also be in the office hours from 11 to 1 this afternoon. So with that, I'm just going to leave this slide up for the rest of the session, which will allow you to kind of match faces and names. We'll just have everyone introduce themselves as they take questions. And then just to get things rolling, I'm going to invite Sam George to say a few words about what we've announced related to the IE platform at Build. He's the group program manager for the IE platform team.
Thanks, everyone, for coming today. So the news that we announced this week, an update to Internet Explorer 11, available on both Windows 8.1 update as well as on Windows 7 at the same time. That'll start getting pushed out over Windows Update on April 8th. So we're super excited about that. That contains both our new Enterprise Mode IE as well as some significant updates to WebGL. And we're also announcing the release of Internet Explorer for Windows Phone 8.1. So we're really excited about that. And then finally, as part of our mission to have a more open and two-way channel with the web development community, we launched a beta of our status.modern.ie website, where we're going to be listing all the features that we either support, are considering, or are under development. And there were 7 that we announced. Again, that site's just in beta. Over the next couple months, we will have it where we feel like it represents an accurate state of the world and what we're working on. So anyway, with that, we'd love to open up to questions. Actually, did you want to do a short introduction, everybody?
Sure.
Okay. Go ahead and start.
Hi, I'm Nicole. Is this on? Hopefully. Hey, I'm Nicole Birdie, and I work on Enterprise Mode.
I'm Tobin Titus, PM on Perf.
I'm John Hazen. I own the application platform, so building apps with HTML.
I'm Frank Olivier. I own all kinds of graphics in IE and most recently the WebGL renderer.
I'm Kevin Hill. I work on the web apps team with John and also do a bit of work on the web view control.
I'm Jacob Rossi. I've worked on touch and all kinds of input and general web programming features.
Andy Stones. I work on the F12 developer tools in IE.
I'm Jorge Peraza. I worked on mobile web development for a few years.
I'm Paul Gasparino. I work on web frameworks, most notably WinJS.
All right, great. So any questions? Anyone want to be the first volunteer? Thank you.
Hello, okay, I'll take the first question. I guess this one comes down to, I think, the IE platform. I think around extensibility without using COM. Particularly, the other major browsers make it really easy to write powerful add-ins, ad blockers, extensions, modify the web to your liking using HTML5, JavaScript extension models. And it's an area that's been quite difficult for IE. So are there plans to open that up and make it easier to have, I'll say, Chrome-style extensions in that kind of model for IE?
So I'll take that one. Yes, absolutely, it's on our list. For us, it's a matter of priorities, and there's a bunch of other things that we're getting demand to do, and it's where it'll fall on the priority list. But we're super aware of it. We do think that we need a better and more modern extensibility model going forward, so absolutely.
Hey guys and girls, my name is Ben Johnson. I recently floated a proposal to the W3C Web Apps group, which actually I spoke to Jacob about a few months ago at a different conference, regarding external protocol handling in a cross-browser scenario. So right now we have a lot of, it's kind of hacky, use iframes, use hyperlinks, nothing's really designed for it. However, IE does have support for it in the, excuse me, in the form of MS Launch URI, so I floated a proposal to make this a cross-browser standard. So I want to get, since you're all here, I want to get your thoughts on that as a general principle. Like, do you think this is a good idea? What do you think the weaknesses are? How do you feel it aligns with things like web intents? And have you seen my proposal?
So web intents has struggled a little bit to gain consensus in the W3C. It's a tough problem to solve in a general way across all the different types of devices and platforms, and also a really wide set of scenarios. In general, yes, the basic support for the protocol launching is something, obviously we've shipped support for a version of that, and I think we're interested in seeing that standardized and become interoperable.
Can you talk about sort of long-term going forward plans for Internet Explorer regarding protocol launching? I noticed a lot of the other browsers are tending to lean towards web-based protocol handlers, potentially at the expense of local protocol handlers. What's the vision for IE for this going forward?
Well, I wouldn't say that we have a definitive vision in mind exactly for how this would work 100%. I do think that both of those scenarios, local apps as well as web sites, should be, we don't think that they're necessarily one is greater than the other, and so they should both be considered for this scenario of handling a protocol.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let's go to the other mic.
Hi, I read an awful lot of comparisons of the major browsers recently and over the past few years, and one thing that sort of strikes me all the time is when they talk about support of HTML5 features, IE always seems to be woefully far behind all the other browsers, and I'm wondering what you guys are doing to increase your support of all the different HTML5 features. Thank you.
Are there some specific standards in mind? And
no,
what kind
it's
of
just that they have
benchmarks?
like lists of features, and there's several hundred of them, and you guys seem to only have about half the number of features, and some of this may have to do with you guys making choices about which features are likely to be important, and the other browsers just seem to be implementing everything.
I'd love to follow up with you afterwards on what the specific gaps are. The web's moving forward pretty quickly, and we think we're doing a great job moving forward with it. There's always more work to do, and we're going to be doing that. We're committed to that. If there's specific things that are causing you grief as a web developer, I'd love to hear about that and help prioritize that for our next release.
Hi, I could follow up on his answer. One thing I noticed is a jQuery pop-up that we recently did a demo in our company, and we were on an 8.1 Windows tablet, and it didn't work. The auto postbacks didn't fire, so we ended up backing out of that and going to Firefox. So there's one example of the compatibility. 11 seems to be very nice, but for some reason it doesn't behave. You end up defaulting to Chrome or Firefox. And then one other question for John. For some of us, I know what a web app is and I know what a website is, but could you define the difference between Apple's structure, where they have predefined templates where you kind of take a template and build around it, and versus what Microsoft's model is going to be?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to speak to that. And And one thing I'll comment on is that there's no clear bright line between what a website is and what a web application is. You can have things that look very much like web applications that just run in the browser, and you can have completely offline packaged applications that have no web backend at all. They could also be an application, and so there's a whole range of things along that spectrum, and I would hesitate to try and define exactly what is a web app and what is not a web app. Our perspective is that we don't want you to be constrained by some particular set of templates or a particular way of implementing the experiences you want to have for your customer or for your business. We want to maintain as much flexibility as possible, so our commitment is to make sure that anything that you could do in the browser is something that you could do in a packaged web application as well, or if you want to mix local code and remote code. As I showed in my talk, you can use basically any of the third-party libraries out there and tools and mechanisms for building cross-platform experiences based on web technologies, and we want to enable you to do that in whatever way makes sense for you. So we don't want to be constrained by a particular set of templates. We want to let you do what you want to do just like you would on the web.
All right, so since the HTML5 thing is so sticky, I just went to html5test.com. Top browsers are Chrome, Opera, Maxthon, which is my favorite because I've never heard of it before, Firefox, Safari, and Internet Explorer level. So I think HTML5, according to html5test.com, I think maybe that's a good website to start and look at exactly the detailed breakdown of why IE11 scores lower for whatever reason. And from my point of view, I do a lot of software development for enterprises. And of course, the benefit of Microsoft is that a lot of companies stick with IE, which is great. But sometimes getting them to move to the most recent version of IE is always a challenge for IT reasons. And so being able to say that, hey, this is really the best browser for HTML5, we can take advantage of that technology and have those companies stay with Microsoft and go up. So that's just a comment there.
Yeah, and a lot of what we're doing, I mean, we're just starting down this road now. A lot of why we're doing enterprise mode IE is to allow enterprises to move to a modern browser and still have great backwards compatibility for a lot of the sites that they just don't want to touch anymore.
Sure.
And you'll see more of this in the future.
Okay. Another follow-up question. In Chrome, one thing that was interesting was this WebRTC toolkit where you can have audio and video directly into the browser. So do you guys have any comments on if maybe Skype will become more browser-centric, or if more of that activity, the browser will have a larger play to go across platform? And just quickly, part of the reason why I'm thinking about that is I develop native apps across all the different platforms. And one of the cool things about that WebRTC promise is I could easily embed audio and video into my mobile app through a web browser extension, and that's like really interesting. So I'm curious to know your thoughts.
We're working with the standards bodies right now on ORTC, which we feel like is a better standard beyond what WebRTC started at.
Okay.
And that is definitely on our list that we're considering for our next version. Again, so right now, just so you folks know, we're in the middle of planning our next version, and so we're looking at all of the things that we could possibly go do, but ORTC is definitely on the list.
Okay, and not that I want to monopolize the mic.
We will be posting status on status.modern.ie as we start turning things from under consideration to in development.
Okay. And if anyone wants to ask any other questions, feel free. One other question was, what was kind of the reasoning to have IE in the sort of Metro or the modern app version of IE separate from the desktop version of IE? That's something that I didn't really quite understand. I don't know if you guys have some explanation or comment on that. It's like a slightly different browser experience, if you know what I mean.
I don't think there's anyone here from the apps part of the side.
Okay.
We're all sort of platform folks, so it's kind of outside of our purview.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. Thank you.
I'm more coming from desktop Java community, C# WPF. So it's a little more strongly kind of a typed discipline I'm coming from. Now, HTML, the JavaScript being the major language, how do you see the dynamic nature of JavaScript moving forward? So I see a lot of activities, for instance, JavaScript, TypeScript that you guys are coming up with. And also Google is working on Dart. And AngularJS, it seems like WPF kind of approach to UI and all that. So that seems to suggest the JavaScript nature of dynamic language seems to have a little, how should I say, a little bit of shortcoming. So especially if you want to develop large application for enterprise and so forth, and one-page application and all these sorts of different technologies trying to somehow remedy the shortcomings, it seems to me. So how do you see JavaScript evolving, moving forward? Will it stay as dynamic language, or and also I see a lot of contention between major players. Everybody is coming up with ideas, and I don't know how Microsoft is positioning itself.
I'll take that too. If you step back at a 10,000-foot view, if you look at native platforms, a lot of what happens in native platforms is you get that early initial deep innovation, and then over time you start to see patterns that emerge. And as those patterns emerge, they move to the web and they become standards, and then they're available everywhere. Type safety is no different. You started to see in native tooling that with type safety and pre-compilation, you can do really amazing things like refactoring and lower the amount of runtime or errors you're seeing at runtime. And that's sort of where you're seeing TypeScript going, right? It's trying to, but the thing to be clear on TypeScript is it's not replacing JavaScript. It's simply augmenting it. Right? It's a design time constraint that allows you to have a great tooling experience, but then it just gets compressed to JavaScript. And one of the things that, if you guys didn't see, in our F12 tools now, we support source maps. So you can have TypeScript converted to JavaScript, and it'll output a source map. And then right within F12, if you're debugging it, you can actually debug it as TypeScript. So it's a really cool feature.
Just to add another comment, since you asked about ongoing commitment to JavaScript itself, we certainly recognize that JavaScript is the common language platform across all of these different operating systems and browsers that we want to support, and we're absolutely committed to JavaScript long term. Our JavaScript team's involved in the standards bodies that are defining the next versions of JavaScript, so we're already working on the ECMAScript 6 work. So like Sam said, there's certainly Microsoft and other companies are looking for ways to enhance and help developers manage large-scale development projects that are ultimately going to be deployed in JavaScript. But JavaScript as a core language is something that we're 100% committed to.
I'll add one more thing to that, which is if you go to status.modern.ie, you'll see some of the ECMAScript 6 features that we shipped in IE 11, as well as some that we're working on now for the next version.
So it seems like, compared to the other two major browsers, that Internet Explorer ships much less frequently. And I understand there's always a trade-off, particularly with the large enterprise base that doesn't want to upgrade, and heck, they're skipping versions already. So to some degree, it seems like it doesn't matter how frequently or infrequently it ships. They're going to upgrade whenever they want. But in terms of wider adoption in the consumer space, I mean, it ships like only with the new version of Windows. We had to wait for Windows 8.1 almost a year after Windows 8 to get any real new features, developer preview notwithstanding, because that's not really wide adoption. So are there any really thoughts or plans on how to kind of have your cake and eat it too, in terms of increasing, or should I say, shortening the release cycle so we can get, just more stuff out there faster? I mean.
Yep, we're super aware of that. We are building plans right now. We're not prepared to talk about exactly when or what frequency or anything like that, but it's something we've heard loud and clear, and it's something we think we need to do. So, thank you.
I'll actually add to that. For features like WebGL, we've actually shipped 4 times in the past 6 months. And we're nearly finished with our renderer. So you'll see us shipping another update with more WebGL in it. So there are some features where we do update more frequently.
So I work for a team that we do JavaScript apps, but we work for a company that's all C# and C++ WinForms development. So we're kind of the lone wolves, and we're kind of trying to push the idea of, hey, let's do this. This is a great technology. So I'm here with about 25 WinForms developers, and so I watch the keynotes. I see the Win.js stuff. I went to the sessions. It's great stuff. I'm really excited about that kind of stuff. But the problem is that at dinner last night, we're talking about this, and the guy says, a bunch of other guys are like, well, why wouldn't we just use Xamarin if we can just write it once and then deploy it all? Why should we be pursuing the web technologies? And obviously, this is something I'm concerned about. So, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on this topic. Any general comments or thoughts you have on that?
I guess I'll take one comment on it. I don't know what others have, but there's a lot of different great technologies that exist, and one of the things we've said is that people who really like C# and .NET development are familiar with it. We think that's a great technology for people to keep using and moving forward with and continue to work with, and there's a lot of things that are great about that. And there's a lot of things that are great about HTML and JavaScript and that whole world, and you kind of have to, pick the ones you want to work on, but Microsoft overall as a company is really committed to both of those technologies. There are different pros and cons of different ones. HTML and JavaScript do have the same kind of UI technology across different platforms. Xamarin is more kind of a programming language model, but then you actually have to write the front-end UI differently to each different system. So there's kind of different models to it depending on the needs that you have and the kind of skills and the things you want to do with it, I guess. That's one thing I'd say, at least.
All right. Thanks.
So this was probably covered somewhere else here that I missed, but in terms of enterprise mode, can you elaborate on how this is different from older browser emulation in previous versions of IE, which has been historically rather hit or miss, as I'm sure you know?
I would love to elaborate on that. So enterprise mode, you can think of it as a very high fidelity emulation. So you're probably all familiar with document modes, and you're also probably familiar if you work in the enterprise space on how those aren't exactly the same as the older versions of IE. Like IE8 doc mode on its own gets you halfway there, maybe most of the way there in some cases, but it's not enough to really provide what the older legacy, line of business apps need in order to function. And what enterprise mode is a much higher fidelity. So it's a combination of configuration and code changes. We send the IE8 user agent string. A lot of the older ActiveX controls will do browser version checks because oftentimes they were written for IE6 and then ported to IE8. And so because they were written for IE6, they were checking if the browser was IE, not some other non-IE browser. So we basically lie to these ActiveX controls and say, yes, you are on a browser that you can run on, so continue to run. We also turned back on some features that had been removed that we had identified as being common in these line of business apps so that these line of business apps would continue to function. And we turned off some functionality that's new, such as pre-render, which was confusing a whole lot of legacy toolbars because on the VTab switch, suddenly the toolbar would go, my tab just disappeared. What happened here? And then they'd freak out and break. Does that answer it?
Yes. Just one more clarification, though. It sounds like you're really taking the existing browser emulation and moving it forward. Like you have your current browser, engine and everything like that, and you add some features in order to have it emulate the previous one. You're
right.
Adding just more features as opposed to, say, like taking the IE6 rendering engine and
right.
porting it so it works in the current browser.
Right. And a big part of this is has to do with a whole lot of the security and performance improvements that are in IE11 that you don't get with running the older binaries. Right. So you get all the benefits of IE11 as well as the improved compatibility from adding the features to IE8, kind of taking IE8 doc mode plus and turning it into enterprise mode.
Okay, thank you.
Could you maybe also talk about the pilot that we ran with?
Right. Yeah, I'd love to talk about the pilot. So the reason why I can speak so authoritatively about what's in enterprise mode and what line of business apps need is that when we started out to do enterprise mode, we were like, okay, we know enterprises have a problem, but we don't have a divining ball, so let's go talk to some enterprise customers. And we had a group of pilot customers that were working with us throughout the development of enterprise mode, and we'd give them, as soon as we had a prototype that would not fall over, we gave it to them and said, okay, we know this is super, super early, but what do you think of this? Tell it, does this meet your needs? Does it not meet your needs? What can we do to make this better and make it so that it would actually solve the problems that you are seeing in your day-to-day work? And so with our pilot customers, we'd iterate on enterprise mode until you get what is in when the update.
One specific instance of that, because I'm living it right now. I have Windows 8.1, IE 11. My company, parts of it are stuck on SharePoint 2007. I try to browse through Windows Explorer so I can download, 10 documents at once, and it tells me my client is can't access. It's not a acceptable client or something of that nature. So do you think enterprise mode would solve that problem?
I'd certainly give it a shot. Without knowing the specifics of what SharePoint or what your current system's looking for, I can't say definitively yes or no, but
sure.
Definitely something you should look into, and it should be pretty easy just to flip a reg key and check it out.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great to follow up on. Basically, SharePoint 2007, just try to browse any document library with IE11, crashes. Okay, one other question I had was, so now that IE11 is continuously updating in the background, from a development standpoint, what's the recommended strategy to support IE? And it's actually equally applicable to Chrome, but I mean, obviously we're talking about IE. So if I'm going to tell my customer base, we support IE, ... we just say latest, and then I just test whatever's available right now, and we expect it'll continue to work, or is there some kind of update strategy that we can sort of align ourselves with?
I mean, that's part of the plan about shipping faster that we're still putting together. Okay. So for right now, it's sort of business as usual. And one of the reasons why we're not talking about the plan about shipping faster is that we need to have all of those things ready for developers and a way to articulate the best practices. So we will as we start to ship faster.
Okay, thanks.
And I want to comment on how to, as a web developer, manage all these versions of browsers. And on a mobile perspective, what we generally recommend is to A, use well-known libraries that abstract some of the pain for you, and then B, always do feature checking before using a specific feature for the browser. So if you're using the feature, you should assume that it's going to continue to work reliably moving forward. And if the feature is not present, you should graciously degrade the experience to use other features or polyfills or some other alternative way for the functionality to come across without having the application collapse.
In light of the new wonderful open Microsoft, any chance for an open source Trident?
Great question. Not at this time.
Nothing? Possibly, maybe someday?
It's certainly something we're considering, but we have no plans right now for it.
Let me walk away dejectedly, though.
I apologize for that.
Okay, so my question is in regards to scripting using the IE engine. Okay, so we've got V8, right, which we can pass any kind of arbitrary JavaScript to, it'll execute it. I've heard that you can do the same thing with the Chakra engine. Is that what we call it, Chakra engine? Mm-hmm. Okay, I hear all the hits. But when I've tried it, it seemed like kind of an edge scenario, something I could play around with, but it didn't have the same kind of feeling that I could just take that engine, pass anything to it. So the question, I guess, are there plans to kind of wrap all that functionality, the powerful Chakra engine, kind of similar to the way V8 and Node.js uses it? What are some of your thoughts on that?
I think I can take this one. So I think the first thing to keep in mind is that when you run the Windows scripting host, so if you're familiar with VB scripts and JScript, which you can run as just literally script files from the Windows Explorer, that's actually not running Chakra, that's running the older version of the script engine. So instantly you'll probably see some differences, like obviously the new ES5 features and stuff aren't in there. But beyond that, Chakra is obviously a core part of IE, and that's the only place right now you can really have access to it is when it's embedded in IE or in the Windows Store apps. I think the Chakra team would definitely have it in their mind about what to do for server scenarios in the future, specifically thinking about scenarios where you have a server side, like you mentioned Node.js and things like that. And clearly that's something on their minds. I don't think they have any plans to announce anything right now, but it's certainly on the backlog somewhere.
Okay, well, and that team, is that the same team is that someone represented here, or is that a different team?
It's a different team. I don't think there's anyone from that team right here now. I'm the closest thing. They're just adjacent to me. But
okay, so you consume that engine, but okay.
It's built as part of Internet Explorer for sure. It's just organizationally they're just different. Since typically at Microsoft, languages and runtimes are owned by a developer division. So like where C# and .NET all is. And
right.
TypeScript. and all the other ones. And so obviously jQuery is a runtime engine for JavaScript, so it's over in DevDiv along with the developer tools.
Okay, okay. So so they might have other specific plans on how they use that engine for scripting language.
I'll add one other thing.
Sure.
So there is something called JSRT, which you should look up if you look up JSRT and Chakra. It's kind of an early direction towards, I think, what you're talking about.
Okay.
I don't know if you've already seen that.
I have not, no.
Okay, yeah, definitely check that out. So they are kind of moving in that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'm Boris from UC Web. So I talked to some of you guys, but it's okay. I'm not here to talk about the apps thing. I'm here to talk about the web, because we are also making service, web app, web page. We think it's more, user experience is not just the tool, it's the whole service. So, but during the development, we found IE is not the compatibility. The problem is not the compatibility with HTML5. It's some of the third-party library, especially the lightweighted one. For example, we currently many of our services use Zepto. After gzep, it's only about 10K. But if we switch to jQuery, it's about 80 or something like that. So my question is there any plan or anything we can do to improve those lightweighted third-party libraries, or do we have any alternative or choice?
So we have relationships with a number of different frameworks, and that's something that we're looking to expand to, further, to have very close, continuous relationships where it's a two-way communication where we can help them run better in IE, and then that also we can help them make web content better as well. And we actually did work in IE11 specifically for Zepto, and so we're going to continue to have, we're going to do nothing but increase focusing on that scenario.
So your recommendation is we just keep with Zepto and you will do better?
Part of this, as a developer, one of the best practices is to ensure that you're always running the latest versions of these frameworks. I think there was mention about the postback issue earlier. I think that might be an outdated version of ASP.NET. And so if you're running on the latest versions using a CDN perhaps that's always keeping you up to date, that'll be a best practice that'll make sure things get better.
Okay, we will pay another check. We just tried something just went wrong. Okay,
and if you have a specific issue, find me afterwards and we'll make sure we take that back.
Okay.
So can I inject on that? You're absolutely right. We were forced to use 2.0 and 3.5 framework on that server. We have no control over that. Is that something we need to take to our management people and say, in order for us to move into this new environment, we'll have to update to the new frameworks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something you want to adopt as a culture of your development.
That's a pain. That's a pain. We just have an argument with those guys last week. Okay, another question. Since we have like Facebook, Twitter in account login in the phone, can we have can I just have direct access to the account? We don't need to, if we open a Facebook page, we don't need to log in again, things like that. Any plan?
Yeah. In Phone 8.1, we actually have done some work to share credentials between the Facebook app and both Facebook.com as well as other apps that use Facebook authentication. So you will start to see that with Windows Phone 8.1.
But I think it's just limited list, like with Microsoft account, Facebook, no linking, no things like that.
I'm not that familiar with the feature. I know we obviously targeted the top authentication, third-party authentication providers out there, but we can follow up afterwards.
Okay, it's a bit open.
Hi, me again. So as I'm sure you know, Mozilla and especially Google are moving aggressively towards sunsetting plugins based on NP-API. Google and Mozilla have shut them down by default, and Google is pulling them entirely out of Chrome at the end of this coming year. So my question to you is Microsoft have similar plans with ActiveX? And if so, are you working on replacement sandbox technologies or anything similar to that?
So I'll take that. So, we're certainly concerned about ActiveX to the degree that, it's an attack vector. It also turns out to be incredibly useful for businesses. So we're not planning on deprecating it because we have a lot of businesses that depend on it. One of the things that we have on our roadmap is we would like to move towards a safer, more like a safer extension model. But you won't see us deprecate ActiveX until we have that out, and then we can give people a reasonable period of time to move to that new version. And so we're not planning on pulling the rug out from under anybody. It's just too many businesses that depend on it.
Do you have any public information about new technologies, or is it still all internal?
It's all internal right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thanks. And as we do develop those plans, we'll be doing so on status.modern.ie.
Hello, sorry for my accent. I work for a company who did a lot of apps for Windows Phone and Windows RT. We have a very trained, good expertise using C#, and we're not thinking about moving to WinJS because it offers us a lot of very interesting opportunities. But the problem that we have is it's like just too loose for us. So we check for TypeScript. It's very, very nice. But is there a plan to supply a TypeScript template for WinJS?
That is definitely on our roadmap, and it's something that we're looking to do, is to have a TypeScript template so that you can use TypeScript with WinJS to make kind of large-scale applications more easily using both of those together.
Okay. And also, since we have a lot of code base and C# right now, and we're trying to make a bridge between WinJS and C# using WinMD, is there also a way to expose like a dynamic from C# and use it as a JavaScript object and WinJS, or it just as as it is right now?
That's not something that right now I think we're looking at, but I can follow up with you more later to understand kind of better what you're looking for and see if there's something we can do about it.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'll try not to be too mean, because I want to say first, I think IE should get the most improved browser from IE 8 to 11, from where it started. However, I want to talk about engagement, because as I work for a global company, we have places all over the place, and in the last several years, we saw IE's market share from our sites drop from in the high 60s to the low 20% of our users. Just a huge shift, and I think I was going to ask you, first part, how are you going to start engaging to the general population because as you can go and say, hey, our Java runtime runs 4% better, and developers are like, cool, but my mom doesn't care. And the other part is, again, I think your developer tools have gotten a lot better, but how are you going to reach out to the development community? Because as a web developer, I don't really know very many web developers that use IE as their browser of development. And, so IE is always the one we check after we get it working in Firefox or Chrome to make sure it looks all right.
So I'll take that. Excuse me. So as I mentioned, for those that weren't in the session the other day on the IE platform, we feel so strongly about having an improved and open communication with web developers, like a real two-way communication. I'm responsible for the Internet Explorer team and its direction and the progress that it makes. I now have a team that's staffed up, that's led by Charles, who is responsible for engaging with the web community and all the open frameworks, and you're going to see a lot more engagement from us. We fully understand that a lot of development is not happening on IE, and that it's happening on Windows or on Mac. So like last year, we launched Modern IE, and we put a bunch of VMs up there using a whole bunch of available technology, a whole bunch of virtualization technologies to help developers with that. We partner with BrowserStack. You'll see more from us in the future. If you're asking if we're aware and we're doing something about it, the answer is yes.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple quick things. So the status site that we launched a couple of days ago is kind of our first public gesture in that direction, you're going to see a lot more from us. We're also encouraging people to come talk to us on Twitter on the 15th of every month, so look for hashtag AskIE. And you're also going to see us become a lot more visible and active at web conferences, around the US and the world. So, we're aware of the feedback, as Sam said, and you're going to see us pick up some steam in that direction.
I think one more thing to add is on the developer tools side, there was a huge change from IE10 to IE11, and we're going to continue that momentum and add new features, make it a much better experience when you do debug and test your apps and run them against IE. And so that's going to be an ongoing thing for us. Like I think my talk next, you'll see a lot of improvements we've made just in a few months since we shipped IE11. So that's going to be an ongoing thing. It's not going to be like, oh, we left the tools. So that's been a pain point for developers for some time, is the tools themselves. So hoping to turn the crank on that as well and make that much less painful.
I'll also add to that, there's also a bunch of things we do in the browser that I think are harder for people to notice. We have a huge amount of time that we spend on making the browser launch really, really fast, pan very, very smoothly. There's a bunch of work in making Smart Screen really, really good. It's one of the best out there. So I think as these features pile up, that's definitely a way for us to get enthusiasts back.
Sorry, I didn't want to be too mean.
That's fair.
Mean is fine.
And with Visual Studio 2013, you can now debug remotely on a Windows phone from your desktop, so that's really cool as well. On our HTML-based applications as well.
Let's go over here.
Just kind of following up with that, I think one of the reasons I tend to work in Chrome first is if I work in Chrome, it's going to give me a sense if it's going to work on Android, Mac, all the different platforms, whereas IE is just basically going to be Windows Phone. This is totally crazy and out of left field, but has there been any talk of bringing IE or the Trident rendering platform to Android, to Mac, back to Mac, I guess you would say, and to other platforms, iOS, so that part of the reason why the mind shares with Chrome is I can just do broad testing across everything. So any motion there, any thoughts about that? I mean, if it was open source, like someone else was suggesting earlier, you'd see it come there.
I mean, certainly if you're asking whether whether the thoughts are crossing our mind, of course. The thing I'll say is that there's a lot of things that we want to do right now, and it just depends on where that's going to fall in the priority stack. But one of the things that I always get the sense from talking to people that build is, are you aware of some of the challenges and directions you want to go? We absolutely are. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So we're fully aware of what web developers are doing today, and we're very committed to continuing some great momentum.
Okay. Thanks.
So I have a couple topics. The first is I'm an enterprise web developer, have been for most of my career, so IE is pretty much a first-class citizen for me, always has been. So I am stoked about the new enterprise mode, so to speak, and would probably evangelize that to our enterprise architects to go from our IE8 standard to probably IE11. On that note, though, the F12 tool, so the developer toolbar, new hotness, you moved my cheese and you took some of my cheese away. You added a lot more cheese, but...
We did take some cheese away. So one of the things when we came to IE11 to reconsider the dev tools was really that the old dev tools had a lot of features and a lot of menus. And we did spend quite a bit of time trying to figure out how to give a new UI, how to really simplify the experience and make it a much easier to use tool, which unfortunately meant that not every feature could be carried forward. Some of the features only partly worked if we were entirely truthful. And so, we did some work, or Nicole did some work as well, to look at some of the data usage, how often were some of the features used, and some of the lesser used features we didn't carry forward. Some of those things were painful, like viewing cookies and stuff like that. And so I think in the future, we have many plans to bring back some of those more requested items. Like everyone has their favorite thing, be it the color picker, the ruler, or the cookies viewer, or the clear cache button for domains and stuff like that. So I think you'll gradually see some of these things come back. But frankly, for IE11, it was more of a prioritization thing. So much of the basic functionality, like having a live DOM tree, was just missing, that we had to really make huge improvements there. And that meant essentially jettisoning a lot of the stuff we had.
Yeah.
But if you have specific features you're missing, feel free to...
The CSS one was...
The viewable CSS files?
I found myself, I actually had to write a style attribute in my markup to get it applied instead of the add attribute. But
yeah, that's definitely real top of our list, to add back a way to see all the CSS files for your application.
Cool.
Hello. My question is regarding the same, I think could be a follow-up. F12 tools. So in Firebug and Chrome tools, debugger tools, we have extension models, so you can have extension for the Firebug. So are you guys have any plans for same kind of model, so you can have extensions to the F12 tools?
Yeah, so currently, right now, we don't have an extension model, and I think, as Sam mentioned earlier, IE as a whole is considering an extension model, like what that would mean going forward, perhaps in a different approach from what we have today. And I think naturally, as part of that, the F12 tools will think about what it means to extend our tools, because right now we don't, and there isn't a way, for example, to add a new panel, to add a watch, or add something in the DOM Explorer. But it's certainly something we're thinking about in conjunction with all of IE, because you don't want a separate extensibility model just for the tools.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
So maybe this will be a bit of a firestorm, but why don't you guys switch to WebKit? Like, why do we have more browser engines than one? Like, why do I have to test on IE and Safari and Chrome? I don't have to test on Chrome and Safari. I only have to test on one because they tend to be pretty ubiquitous, right? Why doesn't IE embrace an open source engine like that?
So I'll take that. So a couple things. I mean, first, I should mention that there's not one WebKit. There's now two. And if
they're pretty close.
And yeah, for now. They're drifting now, especially if you go look in the Blink experimental stuff. They're already starting to drift. One of the things, so I'm relatively new to the Internet Explorer team, and one of the things that I've been very, very surprised about is just how rich an ecosystem there is on the current versions of IE. And there's a lot of businesses that are built on those things. And so one of the things I mentioned was, we are, right now we're putting together plans for how can we make sure to preserve those investments, even more than what we're doing with Enterprise Mode IE, and yet still move very quickly on a more rapid cadence in order to embrace the modern web and move forward with the modern web. So, if you're asking specifically about why aren't we using WebKit, what I can tell you is if we were to do that, that there's a very, very, very high switching cost. Like you probably saw this with Opera as they switched to Blink. And the analysis that we've done is that the fastest way to keep up with the modern web and keep delivering great interoperability is with our current technology. But to do it in a way where we can both preserve existing investments and then also move forward with the modern web.
So a follow-up, actually, just to one of the things you said is, how are we stopping IE10 or IE11 from becoming the next IE8? It's great that where we are today is so much further ahead.
Yep.
But I live in the B2B world. I'm selling to clients who have a hard time getting to IE8.
Yep.
And I don't want to live this for the rest of my life.
No, totally. Great question. The reason why we're doing things like Enterprise Mode and we're going to continue those kind of investments is to help consolidate people on the latest version so that you as a web developer are seeing one user agent string coming up to your site.
Okay.
I wanted to add one other comment to your question about why we don't why everyone doesn't consolidate down on WebKit or Blink, and it's really the nature of competition. And the benefits of competition for you as the developer. Certainly all of us as browser vendors are trying very hard to make sure that the innovations we make don't cause pain as you try and deal with the differentiation between the various browsers. But it's also a very real fact that, that we push each other. And so there's ways in which Chrome and the things that they're doing in the Blink engine and their V8 engine are really pushing Microsoft, and there's ways in which Microsoft is really pushing the rest of the industry as well. For instance, with things we've been doing with hardware rendering and the like in the browser, and so and touch innovations and these kinds of things. And so in the end, we think it's best for you as the developer, for the ecosystem, to have a rich and competitive set of engines that are out there to spur that innovation, and that monoculture would eventually end up degrading your overall experience. And so we want to be engaged and respectful with our competitors in competition with them. But we think that competition is really going to spur a lot of innovation that you guys will be able to take advantage of over the next few years. So we think it's a positive thing that we're staying on the Trident engine, and we think it's a positive thing that Google's moving forward with Blink, and we think it's a positive thing that there's still innovations that are being done on WebKit, and as a browser vendor community, we want to make sure that those things really accrue value to you guys. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just want to add one more thing as well. You know, I think you've seen us switch over to we're a devices and services company now. And if you saw, anybody saw my talk yesterday on performance, I talked a lot about hardware and how hardware actually matters to performance for your web apps. And I talked about all the hardware limitations that are going on. And as we start to couple a lot and start to look more at how we can take advantage of low-cost devices as well as your high-end devices, it's imperative that we be able to have the ability to optimize as best as we possibly can. If we move to something more like WebKit, we don't necessarily have that ability to have that flexibility.
I'll pile on as well. The W3C spec process mandates that you have to have 2 different implementations of a feature before the feature spec is finalized. If you only have one browser engine in the world, you'll probably end up in a scenario where the browser source code becomes the spec for the feature ultimately, and doesn't really outcome that anybody wants, right? You want to have a spec that has been vetted by several implementations.
And I guess I'll just make one more comment, which is as someone building a JavaScript library that has to run across the IE platform and Chrome and other browsers, we ourselves also experience the same issues that all of you in the audience experience with that. And I think that certainly there's a big goal for everyone to make things be interoperable, and we ourselves at Microsoft recognize that and feel that same pain that anyone else does with lack of interoperability. But at the same time, there are things that we're doing with things like frameworks, both the third-party, all the frameworks out in the community, and even the ones that we're contributing ourselves, that I think make it easier for people to develop things that work across browsers, because you can write to that abstraction of the framework and then get the right experience in each browser.
One last thing.
Everyone's going to comment.
Can you tell we're passionate?
Great job.
I said it was a firestorm.
You did say firestorm.
By the way, I love that you asked that question. You guys should feel free to ask these questions.
Yeah.
I mean,
So what I was going to comment is, even though we totally get it that when you start from Chrome, it's easier to get to Android and iOS, I would like to underscore the importance of always testing across a variety of devices and form factors, because there are subtle differences between versions of the OS, especially on the Android world, that could make or cause a ton of pain if you don't catch them early. So just because it's a WebKit-based browser doesn't mean that everything will work the same way everywhere.
Anyone else?
Okay. Coming from a different perspective, let's say if we are developing a web application, most of the time now, as you mentioned, we test on Chrome. That's because we could have a lot of users that is on, let's say, iOS or different platforms that has Chrome on it. So is there any plans to release IE for the other platforms like iOS and Android? This will help. So let's say if we develop an app, we say you can't run it on Chrome, but at least we know there's IE on iOS, which we can recommend to the users to use. We see Office now available on iOS. So any plan for IE?
Yeah, like I mentioned, we're aware of a set of things that we want to go do to move forward with the web. Like I said, we're definitely open-minded to the idea. We think that there's a few things that are a little bit higher priority to do in the Windows ecosystem first, but those things are being discussed. So.
And just a little bit being careful, the Chrome version on iOS is not really Chrome. It's just a browser built on top of the Safari web view control. So feature set wise, as far as web platform is concerned, they're parity with what iOS already has, so it doesn't really add any platform features, only adds UX features.
Just also add, there's also, when considering these sort of things, you also have to think about, the implications of things like direct manipulation. These are tied to the OS, to Windows. These aren't available. So you're not necessarily going to get the same experience and the same exact, just the same exact experience. If we bring a browser over, you might get some rendering that's similar or whatever, but you're not going to get the same experience because a lot of what we do, we improve in the OS and then take advantage of that in the browser.
This is a specific one. Maybe there's a way to do this, and I just don't know. But when I press F5 in Visual Studio, one of the things that drives me crazy is it doesn't always load the latest source. You have to oftentimes go to F12 Developer Tools, press the refresh, from server, refresh your browser. It seems very cumbersome. Am I doing something wrong, or is this just a bug, or is this, because it seems like it should know that you're in Visual Studio. You probably want to reload everything because you're developing your software.
You're probably not doing anything wrong. What happens, of course, is when you browse to a page, the contents get cached. And so when we launch from Visual Studio, we don't clear the cache because, in some scenarios it's useful to have cache. Visual Studio tries to be ambiguous to that sort of nature. So the only option really for you if this becomes a serious problem is that you can label your responses like with an E tag and entity tag and stuff like that, so they always get cache validated. Some people have hilarious hacks where you add like a random URL, like a random string to your URL, like in a query.
Right.
So it's different and it validates the cache each time. Your other option, like you mentioned, is to either use the clear browser cache internet option or to do it in the F12 tools. Yeah, it's something we thought about in Visual Studio. We've had lots of debates backwards and forwards about how much should we affect the environment you launch into. Sometimes, in general, hopefully the IS can do the right thing and send down an entity tag and stuff so you get the right thing. And if you're not aggressively caching yourself, it shouldn't be such a problem. But in general, personally, best bet is press Control F5 in the browser once you've hit the page.
Okay.
And that should reload it with a cleared cache.
So if you're looking for any feedback, almost every developer on our team and developers I've talked to, it drives them crazy. And we were giving a demo actually to some clients, and I was doing some coding demos and stuff, and it bites you a few times, and so just some feedback for you guys. If there's even if it's just optional, always cache when running from Visual Studio type deal. It'd be great.
Actually, for one thing we did change in the F12 tools now is the F12 tools default to always refresh from server. So if you open up the F12 tools and you make a request, it will change the behavior to always get new content. Because it was just that same problem, and many less users cared about cache contents for performance. It was the majority of cases, you want to see an updated file. Yep. So we're certainly considering it for VS at some point.
Great, thanks. What's that? I fixed it in depth and Okay, cool.
All right, we've got time for one more question. So,
this might be a two-part question. First, one is continuing the
Nicely
Firestorm.
done.
Yeah.
So, as major release of IE goes out, will you force existing IE to auto-update to the next major release? So we don't get into the same.
We have auto update enabled by default. Users can't opt out of it. So the answer is no. We are not going to force update.
How would that prevent the situation we're in now, where you have from IE6 to IE11?
Yeah, we're not actually seeing that many people opting out. One of the more significant places where we see people opting out is in enterprise, and that's exactly what we're doing with Enterprise Mode IE. We're making it so that they can move forward and still have a great modern browser, but a highly compatible one for their older stuff.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
One last question is completely kind of separate, but what's your view on JavaScript frameworks that create most of the DOM elements versus something like AngularJS, where the developers are still creating most of the DOM elements, but then applying some JavaScript on top of that? Do you see one being the future versus the other? One framework in particular would be something like Sencha EXT.js.
I would say I think we want to let a million flowers bloom, and that there's a taste for everything, and there's performance implications about different app approaches, and depending on features that you use, that's something you want to profile and ensure that you're optimizing around.
Okay. Yeah, and just to second that, from WinJS perspective, we've tried to design it in a very layered way so that developers have a choice of using it alongside frameworks or on top of frameworks like Angular if you want to have an MVC kind of model like that, as well as just using it directly in a very lightweight way, so you can just take one control and you can interact with the JavaScript object for it, and you don't even have to have any kind of declarative syntax model for it. And so that's been our approach, at least in architecting our own frameworks that we use, is in doing it in a very layered way so that each application can pick the right way that works for that application, for the scale of that application, the performance needs of that application, et cetera, to build it. And so I think it's probably going to be an open world for a while with a lot of different people doing different approaches that make sense for them in their specific kind of scenario.
Okay, thank you.
I'll add we also build features to try and make that make the differences between those different approaches negligible. So an example of that in IE11 was mutation observers.
I'll just add real quick too. You know, to Jacob's point, you know, we let a whole bunch of people build their libraries, and then, you know, our job as browser developers is really just to look and see what developers want to do, what they want to build, how they want to build it, and make it work. So we don't necessarily want to say, well, we want to push the web this way. We want you guys to push the web the direction you want to, and then enable that for you.
As a follow-up to that, do you guys plan to do any improvement to maybe make the execution faster for those libraries that do want to create all the DOM elements?
Yeah, Mutation Observers was specifically targeted for that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we're going to get in one bonus question.
I'm not a web developer. I run a small Microsoft partner consultancy, and we have standardized on Chrome. And the reason we standardized on Chrome is because all of our people basically run the browser with between 40 and 100 tabs open all the time with lots of flash because of the ads on the pages and whatever. And one of the things that Chrome seems to do up to a point is they run every tab in a separate process. And IE really creaks with that kind of usage pattern. And one of the real annoyances we have, and I feel right now that I'm sort of asking to have my cake and eat it too. As a partner, when we go to the partner administration sites, they don't work on Chrome. They only work on IE. And I'm wondering, in terms of standardization across browsers, what is it that the partner sites are doing that they don't run on other than IE? But the real problem is handling lots of tabs open all the time. It just doesn't work so well under IE. Every time we try and do it, it just falls off a cliff.
That's on IE 11?
Say again?
That's on the latest version, IE 11?
We haven't, since we tested this, I guess, on IE 9, IE 10. We haven't looked at 11 recently, but it was pretty bad.
We did a lot of work on IE 11 to improve that specific scenario. We did a lot of things to slow down timers, slow down JavaScript in the background tabs where we can. And also we suspend where we can in background tabs. So try IE 11, it's probably much better.
We also run tabs on different processes as well.
You do?
We were the first guys to do that.
All right, so thank you very much, everyone. This was great.